Good evening. If you would, please turn your Bibles to the book of Ephesians. Ephesians will be in chapter 5 and first part of 6 tonight. Here we are of lesson 5 out of 6. It's just screaming right by. I have to give a shout out to Casey over there. When I said hello to him, he said, "It's been good so far, don't ruin it." So, it made me laugh. So, good to be with you tonight. It's always good to be with God's people and worshiping and praising, thinking about the concepts that we just sang about. That was a good enough sermon, I know. So thank you so much, Stephen, for that. We're going to be looking at, the lesson tonight is going to be about love and respect. And we're going to look at relationships and how that ties into what we've already been talking about through this series of lessons. The lessons that we've talked about is how we've been blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Christ. God's just lavishing all of these rich blessings on us in Jesus. He's raised us to sit up in the heavenly places, cleansed us by His blood, sanctified us by His Spirit, sealed us for the day of redemption, made us one body. We're fellow heirs, fellow partakers. And considering all of this rich grace and mercy that He's given us, as we talked about last night, that should change how we think, change how we walk. That we're going to walk worthy. We're going to walk differently. We're going to walk in love. We're going to walk in the light. And we're going to walk and watch where we walk. And those who were last night, you got a colorful illustration of that. We're going to watch where we walk. And you'll always remember that too. And if you weren't here, you got to ask somebody. So it's good to be with you tonight. So encouraging. So tonight, love and respect. We're going to look at relationships like marriage and parenting. And I have all the answers. Well, I know God does. Marriage and parenting and children toward their parents and people in the workplace, employers and employees. Again, like I said, great to be with you. Enjoyed meal times and times of fellowship with brothers and sisters outside of the building. It's so encouraging. So encouraging to know that no matter where we are, we've got like-minded people. We all have the same goal, the same Lord, same issues. You got issues, I got the issues too. But we're all going to the same place, and Jesus is in our hearts. And He said, "I will never leave you or forsake you." And that always gives me encouragement. Sometimes I forget it. But He promised that. And so, in Ephesians chapter 5, we're going to get into this idea of transformed relationships. As you might see in your outline there, I have more on my outline. There'll be more on the internet, or on the website. And Jason will have that up, or somebody, whoever does that. But transformed people have transformed relationships. No matter what relationship it is we're talking about, whether it's friendship or children and parents, parents and children, how you are in the workforce, how you are at school, on a ball team, it's about relationships. That's what life's about. A lot of it is relationships. With all these people that have skin on that I keep talking about. And sometimes we start wrong when it comes to changing our relationships. We start on the behavior end instead of dealing with the mind part. And we can't change how we behave toward each other until we change how we think about each other. And that's why, as we consider this transformed mind, God is working a new creation within you. That's what we see in the book of Ephesians. A new creation. That we are transformed, just like God said, "Let there be light." He is transforming you from the inside out. And that changes all of our relationships. It changes how I see you and how you see me. You're only going to be nice for so long when you don't think that well of each other. We can only fake it so long. You hear that expression, fake it till you make it? You ever try that and it doesn't work? You can't fake it very long. And so this idea of transformed, putting off the old man, it's not putting on the new man. It would be nice if that was a one and done deal. I've put off the old man. I can give you the date. I put on the new man, I can give you the date and time, and everything's perfect now. How many did that? Sorry, you got to work on this every day, every hour. You ever wake up and you're having a great day and it's like, this has been wonderful and everything's going great, and then by the end it's a nightmare and a train wreck? You ever been in a fight on the way to church? Nobody's ever been, no husband or wife ever got in a fight on the way to church. Well, it's not a one and done deal. We're always growing in this area. And so we have to be renewed constantly. And that means our head and our mind always has to be in the book. And to be around people whose head is in the book. There's two reasons. Jason Cicero, who's a minister out in Annandale, Virginia, told me there's two reasons you read the Bible. One is to behold the author, and the other is to become like the author. And I like that. To behold the author and to become like the author. And that's what we're doing right now. That's what we're talking about in the book of Ephesians. You familiar? I believe you studied a little bit. I think it was earlier this year. Jason told me about the tabernacle. And this box that God had the Israelites create, this movable golden box that had the cherub with the wings touching, and they had to carry it on their the poles, the priest did. This box, this movable box, represented, it was the Ark of the Covenant, and it represented the presence of God. And it was behind a veil. And when they moved that, we know one time in the history of Israel, they tried to move that with a cart instead of on the poles like they were supposed to. It was in the time of David. And a man died because of that. And it's interesting that during that period of time, one of those overlooked passages, I'm sure you talked about it, but one of those overlooked passages is what happened to that Ark of the Covenant for 3 months. It was placed in a house of a man called Obed-Edom. And I'll give you a verse here. I don't know if I had that in the outline for tonight, but 1 Chronicles 13, write that down if it's not there. 1 Chronicles 13, verses 6 through 14. And just take note of this, that when the presence of God, this movable box which symbolized the presence of God, when that presence of God was in the house of Obed-Edom, God blessed all that he had for 3 months. And I think about this relationship aspect of it. If God's presence is in your heart and you are growing with Christ, he will bless all that you have. And that's just not pie in the sky theology. That's what Jesus promised. And it will transform how you think about your husband or your wife. It will transform how you think about your brethren, your friends, how you think about work. You're not working for your boss anymore, you're working for Jesus. And that sure helps it when he's a jerk, or she. And just like I said last night, yes, we think that sometimes. And so we're getting our minds and our eyes off of the temporary, the physical. Sometimes we have to get our eyes past the person with the skin on and look through that to Jesus. Because the person that has the skin on that's in front of you, you may want to throttle them. You ever felt like that? Be honest, come on. You just want to throttle them. Just hurt them a little bit. Not too much. You have to look through the person with skin on and keep your eyes focused on Jesus. Think about Peter. Peter was walking on water. Why? Because his eyes were focused on Jesus. What happened? The first moment he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the winds and the waves and the storm, he sunk. What happens in our relationships, doesn't it? When we get our eyes off Jesus and focused on the moment, there goes that. It just sinks. You start out, you come to the table, husband and wife, or maybe you're going to work, but you come to the husband and wife come to the table, and it's a good morning, hello, honey, and then one comment's made, and then another back and forth, and by the time this was a great morning until this. Well, get your minds and eyes off Jesus, or off each other, and think of Jesus, and focus on the Lord, and we'll talk more about that, but Peter was able to walk on water when his eyes were focused on Jesus. And so if you look at this, I meant to talk about that, but I didn't. So there you go. This is on your outline. I'm just throwing it up there. This breaks all PowerPoint law. There's a code out there I'm violating. There's too many. I know. I got it. But you have a big screen, so hey. And it's on your papers. So I'm not going to jail. As I said, when you're studying the Bible, as I've said yesterday and the day before, when you're studying the Bible, keep looking for patterns. Keep looking for things that keep coming up. And as you're reading about these relationships, you keep seeing things being talked about. As to the Lord, it's about God, it's about Christ. As to the Lord, it's about God, it's about Christ. All of these things. Any of our relationships, you're going to work, it's about Jesus. He's the one you really get the paycheck from. And so all of these, the masters, wives, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord. We'll talk about this in a moment, but you're not submitting to him because he's worthy of it. And by the way, if marriage was always easy, these passages would never be written. And so I have to get our eyes off of the temporary and look to Jesus. And that's what we see there, as to the Lord. Now, we're going to get to marriage here in just a moment. And understand this. It's a couple things. I used to say, because I was taught, the only person you could change is yourself. I don't even believe that anymore. Read Ephesians, and who's doing the changing? Who's doing the transforming? Now, yes, I have to be a willing participant in this party. I have to work with God, but it is God who's transforming. So not even I can change myself. And so how many times in our relationships are we focused on changing the other person? If my boss would just, if my kids would just, if my parents would just, if those brethren would just, you focus on following Jesus. You cannot change anyone else, and we don't even have the power to change ourselves without the power of Jesus Christ. And so we need to rely on the power of God working in somebody else because they may not change. And here's another thing that I wanted to bring up about this. I heard a brother say years ago, God was the greatest father ever, and his children walked away from him. Was he a bad parent? God was the greatest husband ever, and his wife cheated on him. Was it because he was a bad husband? Sometimes we go there in relationships, don't we? Well, what did they do wrong to... God was the greatest father ever, and even his children walked away. And so there is some things you cannot control. Yes, we have a responsibility to teach, and I have a responsibility as a husband to love Anna, but I can't change Anna. Only God can. So think about these things as we read in these scriptures about marriage and other relationships. Ephesians chapter 5. Most of us who are men like to start in verse 22. Wives, be subject to your husband. Oh, yes. I want to start earlier. We talk about singing to one another and having our hearts to the Lord, verse 19. Always giving thanks, verse 20, in the name of the Lord Jesus to God. Our eyes are on God. Our eyes are on Jesus. And be subject to one another. Where's your eyes? In the fear of Christ. Men, yes. Women, yes. Where's our eyes? Jesus. Remember chapters 1 through 3. And we can't study that all tonight, obviously. Wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. Where's your eyes? On Jesus. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, and that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. And so husbands also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. The mystery is great, but I'm speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. You see that? Love and respect. Why? Read chapters 1 through 3. Why would a wife respect her husband? Because she loves Jesus. As if Jesus shed the blood on the cross and sacrificed for her, her eyes are on him, and even when he's not being easy to live with, her eyes are on Jesus. I think that would help tremendously in our relationships. But I want to look at this in a lot of different ways. Notice it says to husbands, love your own wives as you love yourself. Why is it that a husband doesn't love his wife? When a husband is not treating his wife the way Christ treated the church, it's because something's wrong here. And until he gets that right, he can't get right with his wife. And so, men, I want to talk to you for a little bit. Look at how many times in the Bible talks about having clean hands and a pure heart. Clean hands and a pure heart. James chapter 4, clean hands, pure heart. 1 Timothy 2, holy hands. That means clean hands and a pure heart. What's the devil doing to a lot of men in our culture? He's dirtying up their minds, our minds. You can't love your wife with a dirty mind. Clean up your mind, and then you can love your wife. Holy hands, clean hands, pure heart, without which no one will see God, Hebrews chapter 12 tells us. Holiness, without which no one will see God. Blessed are the pure in heart, kids. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Right? You know that passage? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. That's why kids see God. Not that wait, there's God. I don't mean that they see the Lord directly, you see his glory. But they're seeing things with holy eyes, not with defiled eyes. And so we have to understand that God from the very beginning, look at what we just see here in in Ephesians 5. Look at what we see here. Where does he go back to? He goes back to Genesis chapter 2. He goes back to Genesis chapter 2 and says, verse 29, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. And he goes to Genesis chapter 2. Eve was literally a member of Adam's body. Eve was literally a member of Adam's body. He took from Adam's body a rib and created Eve. He could have done that in a lot of ways. But he created Eve from the side of Adam, and she was a member of his body, and he made them one flesh. And so as we think about at the cross, and Jesus' side was pierced, and out of it came forth blood and water, and from that side came the church. Think of that beautiful relationship. God made man the head of the home, and he wanted that home to be led to heaven. And what happened in the Garden of Eden? We might get focused on Eve. Yeah, Eve's mind was distracted and deceived by the devil, and she wasn't content with what God gave her. And she thought God was holding her back. Look at how the devil deceived her. But once she ate of that fruit, the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 3 that she gave to her husband with her. Notice it in the text if you haven't. She gave to her husband with her, and he ate. He was standing there. As a man, he dropped his most important role, and that was to lead his wife spiritually. We see how my focus as a husband and your focus as a husband is to have that mindset that just like Jesus is the Savior of body, my most important role is to help get my wife to heaven. Because my eyes are on Jesus, and I want her to have her eyes on Jesus. And we have to have our hearts pure and our lives pure before we can do that. And so that's very important for us to consider. Love your wives just as Christ also loved the church. Wives, Wives, it says, Paul calls wives to follow Christ, to follow and submit to their husbands in everything, respect their husbands. Why? Because your eyes are on Christ. When a woman keeps her eyes on Jesus and remembers that she was created by God to be His helper, I think about Anna, and where I am today is because of God and Anna. I prayed for a woman who would love God more than anything, including me. And I'm thankful that I was given that. I'm glad I have a strong-minded woman who loves Jesus, and sometimes it makes me uncomfortable because she tells me what I need to hear. But she is trying to help me get to heaven. But there's also times when I know I have her support, I know I can do anything. And wives, I just want to talk to them about that. It's very easy sometimes to nitpick and eat at the husband. Just talk down to the husband, pick on him, boss him around, make fun of his ideas. Sometimes you see wives treat their husband like a guy who can't even tie his own shoes. She doesn't respect her husband. And I'll tell you, if you don't respect your husband, you don't respect Jesus. And so, if you don't show respect, again, you can't control what someone else does. And I know that, like I said earlier, sometimes situations happen where that marriage can no longer stay together. And I'm not talking about that. Things like that happen. But you still have to love as Jesus loves, no matter what. So think of what you can do. Think of the women in the Bible. Think of the Ruths in the Bible. Think of the Esthers in the Bible. Think of the Marys in the Bible. Think of these women and what they did and how they helped their husbands. Over the years, I know for myself, because I grew up in it, and I know for many others, and I know some women who are here tonight. For years, you didn't have the support of a husband as you're bringing your children to church, and you're teaching them about Jesus, and you didn't have that support. And yet you kept teaching, you kept instructing, you kept loving, you kept doing what you were supposed to do, and you were constant, and you were true. And look at the results. Look at the results. What can you do? I want you to look with me real quick, 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, "In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives." In verse 2, "As they observe your chaste and respectful behavior. Your adornment must not be merely external, braiding the hair and wearing gold jewelry and putting on dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God." And we see that a woman can win her husband to the Lord by her behavior. Again, I understand that man's got to make his own decisions, but you have great power God gave you. And like I said, I know that what Anna has done for me in my life. Because her eyes are on Jesus. And there have been times, and boy, you know this first, everybody, I'm sure you can understand this, the first few years of marriage, kind of rough, aren't they? Anybody ever have that? I see a few saying, oh yeah. It was for me too. I mean, I thought I was perfect, right? I had all of the advice on marriage before 1996. I guarantee you. That all went shoo. Let me ask you something. Couples, are you praying together? Men, are you making it a point to pray with your wives? This is your job. This is your family, your home that God made you the head of. You lead it to heaven. You take charge of this. So many times I watch husbands delegate this and punt to their wives. No, sir. And I'm glad you're here tonight, men. I'm not beating up on you too bad, but you take charge. You lead. Pray with your wife. Sometimes in our marriages, I think I think as men we lead this hunter, and we court and we date and we spend all this time and attention and write letters. Anna still has a box of all the letters I wrote her while we were dating. I think she just brings it out once in a while to remind me. And man, are those letters ooey gooey. Oh, my lands. I mean, just sick. I mean, it's like eating too much chocolate cake. I don't know if that's possible, but we work so hard, to get the girl, and we get the girl, and then we move on and say, oh, now I got to do the job thing and, take care, provide, right? And so I remember the first few years of marriage, I'm out saving the world. And Anna's raising these 3 little kids, and I'm hardly around. I forgot the date. When's the last time husband and wife, I know how many kids, you got a lot of kids, I got it. Or if you have kids or not, it doesn't matter. When's the last time you went on a date? I'm going to be in trouble, right? When's the last time you did some of the things that you used to do before you were married or when you were early married? Go out and do those things again. Find something that you're interested in together and go do that. Or go do something that the other person's interested in. Spend time together. Spend time together. Talk together and turn all of the technology off. I think I'm going to become more and more crotchety and grumpy. I don't know what you call it, but I'm getting tired of all this technology sometimes. People are so distracted, they can't even communicate with each other. Turn the dumb stuff off and talk. Spend time together. Enjoy each other's company. Learn to laugh again. Sometimes we have to do that. So remember, the most important thing, the wife is her eyes are on Jesus. And yes, there are times when she's going to bite her tongue, maybe even until it bleeds. She's going to bite her tongue because her eyes are on Jesus. There may be something that he wants to do. She's like, you know what? I'd rather do it this way, but I'm going to go your way because my eyes are on Jesus. And the husband is going to love his wife because his eyes are on Jesus, and he realized what Jesus did for him. Roger Schaus, who did our wedding 19 years ago, said I don't remember much about the wedding. I mean, okay, let's be blunt. I'm ready to go to the honeymoon, okay? You can laugh, it's okay. That's what I'm ready for, okay? With all this planning, I'm ready to go. Torch Lake, here we come. I do remember one of the things he said in that wedding was that you cannot be wrong with each other and right with the Lord. And that has stuck with me due to some of those knockdown, drag-outs that we've had. Oh, we had them too. You can't be wrong with each other and right with the Lord. Think about that. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Okay, let's continue in Ephesians chapter 6. And so husbands, wives, just like Christ and the church, children and fathers, parents understand, and maybe you do already, but remember that children have different personalities. And there's different ways of approaching different children. And each one, I mean, I think the Lord was laughing on number 6 with Emma. And I think I'm getting the last laugh right now because her middle name is my mother-in-law, Sherry's name. So it's Emma Sherry. And so anytime she's in trouble, she gets her middle name. It's Sherry. And so I have to remind my mother-in-law, see, you know, it's your fault. But Emma is a firecracker. And she broke all the rules. You see, when Joseph was born, we'd come to the church building, during the Lord's Supper, and I remember sitting over there at Lafayette, and Joseph would just start to cry in services and make little noises or whatever, and we'd kind of tap his lips, and he'd quiet down. He learned it right away. Boom, tap it, well, he's done. Jessica said, well, this works. I mean, no problem. Jessica, sitting there, she starts to make noises. I tap her on her lip, and she goes, bah! Must have gotten that from me. I know what I thought, but I said something else. Learn their personalities. They're different. They're different. And so don't think a one size fits all because God doesn't do that. Read the scriptures. He doesn't do that with his children. And children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. In the Lord, where are your eyes on the Lord? Are your parents perfect? No. Are your parents always going to do everything right? No. But keep your eyes on Jesus. Show respect for your parents. You're not going to disrespect authority. I don't care if it's teachers or parents or coaches, whoever it might be. You will not be your bosses. You don't disrespect them and get blessed by the Lord. That does not compute. It doesn't connect. We've got a lot of disrespect going on right now. Lord, you respect and you start with your parents. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. There were 10 commandments, Paul says. The first one is the one that had a promise, is honor your father and mother so that it may be well with you. You know, there's a reason you tell your kids not to stick sharp, small metal objects into the light socket. There's a reason for that. Why? You're going to get fried. Remember yesterday, don't do this, why? There's a reason that parents have rules. There's a reason that parents we want you to do things this way. Why? Because they love you. They want to keep you safe. They want you to grow up healthy, and they want you to have good friends. Why? Because those friends that don't love Jesus, they're going to cause all kinds of grief. And so honor your parents, respect your parents, love your parents. And by the way, does that stop at 18? No. My mom still tells me what to do, and I'm 41. And that's okay. Honor your parents. Show respect to them. You know, it's okay to bring back a little bit of yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. I think we could use a lot more of that. Honor your father and mother, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. Verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Fathers, God has called you specifically to lead this home to heaven. I'm so glad. I'm so thankful to God to see so many fathers here tonight. There's a time, I heard Gary Sandusky say this, it's just that for some reason, a lot of guys think that religion's for women and children. So I'm just very thankful to see you men here tonight. Lead your family to heaven. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. This is done by being too hard on them, by expecting too much, by being impossible to please. Fathers sometimes can also be pretty rough with their joking. We mean to be funny, but sometimes we hurt a child's feelings. You ever done that, dads? Well, you don't have to shake your heads. I know you did. We've done that. We've been a little too rough, or we've expected too much. Okay? And we have to understand that where does a child, fathers, where does a child get his or her view about God? What's God called? Our Father. How do you get your understanding as a child about our Father in heaven? From you, Dad. And so love those children. Do not provoke them by picking at them and being hard to please, like I said. You know, I've seen men in their 70s still cry because of how hard their dad was on them. You have tremendous impact, but yet also on the same, you can be tremendously blessed, a tremendous blessing to your children, that you can be the support. You can, when they have ideas and they may seem crazy, well, fan the flames. Children, Joseph was the inventor when he was younger. He's always coming up with some crazy invention. Fan the flames. Man, that's great. Keep going. The kid loved Legos, man. We just buy Legos. Although at 11 o'clock at night, when you got a bunch of Legos in the bottom of this little container, and you know what I mean? If you've heard of Legos, have you ever stepped on a Lego in the dark? Tim Hawkins, who's a comedian, has a routine about that. But you ever step on a Lego, and it's hard not to provoke them to wrath because you want to throw it at them. But fan the flames. Find out what they're interested in. My daughter, Jessica, she loves horses, so we encourage that. Hey, go for it. You're paying for it, but you go for it. Lindsay loves art. Man, she just came out of the womb doing art. That's just her. She's like her mama. She loves art. Fan the flames. Encourage her in that. Find ways to encourage her. Take the things, buy her things so she can do that. Get her around people where she can be encouraged in her gifts. I think that's part of training up children in the way they should go. Fan the flames. Father, be the person that when they have an idea, say, "Oh no, that's stupid." Don't do that. Encourage them. Lift them up. And that's what we need. There's a vacancy of fathers needing that are supposed to be the way they are in this culture. And we need to say as our families, that's not going to be so with me. As Joshua said, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I'm taking this by the reins. And if you didn't do that with your children, do it with your grandchildren. Start. Be that father. Bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. You as a father are to be focused primarily on the salvation of their souls. That may be that you have a structured Bible study. It may be that you have a time that you study with the kids and read with them. But more than having a structured study, that may not work for everybody. But when you're driving in the car, talk about Jesus. When something happens at school, you're taking that opportunity to talk about Jesus. When you look at a flower, a dandelion, or a butterfly, you talk about Jesus. You're always directing their attention to Jesus. When great things happen, let's talk about Jesus. When you're getting ready to buy a house and put it on the market, you bring the family in the room and you kneel and you hold hands and you pray about that. Now, believe me, I didn't get this right early on. I made a lot of mistakes as a father. Anna, I think she could say a lot more. I was absent. I was too busy doing everything else. It's like, well, you're a preacher. Yeah, I was busy saving the world. And Anna was raising 3 little kids by herself. Okay, so I've made these mistakes. I understand. But you take opportunities, like again, you're buying a house or you're doing something, say, hey, honey, let's pray about that. Dads, take your daughters on a date. Show them that they're precious. I must say so much, but take Joseph and I went on just as an example, Joseph and I went on a couple hikes. Last year we went to Yosemite. This year we went to Pictured Rocks. But I've been putting that off. Joseph is now 18-year-old. He's going to be 18 years old in February. I didn't have been doing that years before. But I had a friend of mine who had been telling me, do this with your son, do this with your son. And he passed away from an aneurysm. And he's gone. My friend was just taken like that. And guess I better kick it in gear, huh? Dad, it's time to step it up. And so think about these things. Take time to spend with your children. Show them that you're important. Turn off the television. It's okay to turn off ESPN. I know it's hard. We can do it. All right, final thing. Slaves and masters, Ephesians chapter 6. He says, slaves, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling and the sincerity of your heart as to Christ, not by way of eye service, as men pleasers, but as slaves. Where's your eyes? Where's your attention at work? But as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. With good will render service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good thing each one does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether slave or free. Now again, that's whether you're a slave, you feel like a slave or not. You know, your employee, slave, doesn't matter. You have a boss, you go to a job, you get your eyes off the temporary and you look to Jesus. You get your eyes off the temporary and you look to Jesus. Why is it that you don't steal at work? Because you want to get fired? No. You don't steal at work because your eyes are on Jesus. When your boss is being very difficult and dictatorial and micromanaging and driving you crazy, you show a good attitude toward your boss and you don't gossip about him behind his back. Why? Because your eyes are on Jesus. And you get your paycheck. It may not, your paycheck doesn't say Jesus on it, I know. There's not a direct deposit in Huntington Bank from Jesus. But God's going to richly bless you as well. When you're going to work, take note. You keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Your job at work is to glorify Jesus. You know, there may be somebody at work who's looking for help and looking for Jesus. And because you show the right attitude, they're going to be led to Jesus. He also reminds the masters, verse 9, do the same things to them and give up threatening, knowing that both their master and yours is in heaven and there is no partiality with him. If you're in a place of authority at work, keep your eyes on Jesus and remember that he's your master. And if I want mercy from the Lord, I better show it to my employees. I better show it to those who are working for me because I want to receive mercy on the day of judgment from Jesus. And there is no partiality. There's no class system in the day of judgment. And so I think it's very good words of encouragement there for us to consider. So I appreciate your attention. Marriage, like Christ in the church, obey parents in the Lord. Fathers, bring them up in the training of the Lord. Slaves, keep your mind, as you go to work, keep your mind on Jesus. And masters, remember that your master is Jesus. Think about these things. And I hope that it's been encouraging to you. And I hope that if you're struggling in some relationship, that you sit down and talk with somebody here about that. Sit down and have somebody pray with you about that. If you're having, you know what, let me just say, if you're having marital problems, again, it takes two to do this. You have to have two to agree to do this. But it is not a shame to ask for help. It is not a shame for a husband and wife to come together with somebody else and say, we need some help. Can you sit down and counsel us, Kevin? Kevin say, no, I'm too busy, right? No, Kevin didn't say that. We need some encouragement. Can you help us? There's not a shame in that. The shame is not asking. Think about these things. I hope that you'll be encouraged by it. And if you need any help, come forward. Think about these things as we stand and sing.